It was supposed to be a quick trip to the courthouse, nothing more than signing my roommate's lease documents as a witness. Instead, I walked out legally bound to a man I'd barely spoken to, me so-called husband, a smirking, maddeningly composed lawyer who looked like he'd planned the entire accident. And the worst part? He didn't seem one bit sorry. The sun outside the downtown courthouse was merciless, bouncing off glass towers and burning the back of my neck, but inside my chest was a storm I couldn't name. I clutched the signed papers with trembling fingers, glancing up at the tall man beside me. He was reading the documents with the calm of someone reviewing a grocery list, not the papers that had just tied us together in matrimony. "Congratulations," he finally said, sliding his sunglasses onto his face, voice smooth, teasing, maddeningly confident. "You're officially my spouse." I gawked at him, my throat drying. This is insane. There has to be a mistake." "There was," he replied, lips quirking upward. "But I'm not complaining. My name is Daniel Cruz, 26, ordinary to the point of invisibility. I stock shelves at Target, deliver Uber Eats on weekends, and fight to pay rent in a city that doesn't care if you drown. Love? Marriage? Those were distant luxuries for people who didn't count their bank balance before buying milk. Yet somehow, fate or a cruel cosmic joke handed me to Adrien Blake, a 33-year-old defense attorney who probably billed more in an hour than I earned in a month. He was sharp lines and sharper wit, the kind of man who made people listen when he entered a room. He wasn't supposed to notice people like me, but he did. And now, legally, he owned half of me. The story of how I ended up in this mess started with my roommate Ethan begging me to help. He was on the verge of losing his lease, panicked, desperate, and I was the idiot who agreed to meet him at the courthouse during my lunch break. "Just sign where I tell you," Ethan had said. "I'll owe you a week's rent. Easy, harmless," until my signature ended up on a marriage license instead of a witness line. And that's when Adrien appeared, his gaze sharp and unreadable as he slid the documents into the clerk's hands like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. When the clerk stamped them with official approval, my world tilted. Now, standing on the courthouse steps, I couldn't breathe. "Undo it," I demanded. "We'll go back in there, explain the mistake, and get it annulled." Adrien chuckled, the sound low and dangerously pleasant. "Annulment requires grounds. Mistake isn't good enough when both parties signed willingly." "You knew." My voice cracked. "Of course," he said smoothly, eyes glinting. "I've been waiting for someone like you." That night, back in my shoebox apartment, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed every few minutes with texts from Ethan, all apologies and frantic explanations. But my mind wasn't on him, it was stuck replaying Adrien's smirk, the way he'd leaned in as if daring me to fight him, to deny the strange current between us. I hated how my stomach twisted, not entirely with anger. 2 days later, he showed up at my door. Adrien looked utterly out of place in the peeling hallway, his crisp navy suit untouched by the grime of my building. He held a paper bag in one hand, coffee in the other, like he owned the morning. "Why are you here?" I snapped, half hiding behind the chain lock. "Because you're my husband," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "And I thought I'd bring you breakfast." I should have slammed the door. I should have screamed, told him to leave me alone. Instead, I found myself staring at the steam rising from the coffee cup, at the easy confidence in his posture. My chest tightened with something dangerously close to curiosity. "I don't want this," I whispered. He tilted his head. "Then why aren't you closing the door?" And I didn't have an answer. Adrien began weaving himself into my days like it was inevitable. He learned my schedule, showed up at the diner where I sometimes ate cheap pancakes after late shifts, walked me home when the streets grew too dark. People looked at him, really, and I felt the burn of their stares. What was someone like him doing with someone like me? But Adrien didn't seem to care. In fact, he looked like he enjoyed the spectacle. One evening, after a particularly brutal day where I'd nearly been fired for showing up late, he found me sitting on the curb outside my apartment. I wanted to disappear into the cracks of the city. He crouched down, his suit pants brushing the dirty sidewalk, and tilted my chin up, "You're stronger than you think," he murmured, eyes locking with mine. "And whether you admit it or not, you need someone in your corner. Let me be that." I shoved his hand away, but the heat of his touch lingered. "Why me? You could have anyone." "Because anyone isn't you," he said without hesitation. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. The weeks that followed were a storm of contradictions. One moment, I hated him with every nerve in my body, and the next, I found myself waiting for his texts, listening for his knock on my door. Adrien had a way of sliding into my life like he had always belonged there. And maybe, in some terrifying, unspoken way, I wanted him there. But the universe never lets anything stay simple. It happened on a Friday night. I had worked a double shift, my feet blistered, my body aching, when I came home to find Adrien in my apartment. Not waiting politely, not sitting in the living room, was in my kitchen, sleeves rolled up, making pasta like he lived there. "You gave me a key," he reminded me when I demanded an explanation. "I didn't give you—" I froze, memory slamming back. I had tossed him my spare key weeks ago in a haze of exhaustion, too tired to argue, too tired to think. Now it felt like a trap. "You can't just walk in," I snapped. "Why not?" His gaze was calm, steady, but beneath it was a tension I hadn't seen before. "We're married." Something inside me cracked. "Stop saying that like it means anything. It was a mistake, a stupid accident, and you're treating it like fate." He put the spoon down, walked around the counter, and stood close enough that I could smell the faint scent of his cologne. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. "Maybe it is fate. Maybe I'm not the one fighting it you are." I wanted to push him away, but my hands betrayed me, gripping his shirt instead. My throat burned with words I didn't know how to say. That was the night I realized the truth. I wasn't afraid of Adrien. I was afraid of what I felt when he was near. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Adrien invited me to a charity gala. "As my spouse," he said with that insufferable smirk. "You're expected to attend." I refused. But when I showed up to deliver Uber Eats in that same neighborhood, I saw him through the glass walls of the ballroom. He was surrounded by beautiful people in gowns and tuxedos, laughing, commanding the room, every inch the man of power I could never touch. And then I saw the way a woman leaned into him, her hand brushing his arm, her smile bright. My stomach twisted, sharp and ugly. He looked untouchable, like the distance between us was written in stone. I left before he noticed me. That night I packed a bag. When Adrien came looking for me, I was gone. I crashed on Ethan's couch, tried to erase the sound of Adrien's voice from my head, the way he said my name like it was worth something. Days turned into weeks. He called. He texted. I ignored everyone, until the night he showed up outside Ethan's apartment in the pouring rain. "Daniel!" His voice carried up the stairwell, raw, broken in a way I had never heard before. "Please, just listen." I stayed frozen on the couch, staring at the ceiling, willing myself not to move. Ethan shot me a look that said, "You're insane," and then went to let him in. When Adrien stepped into the room, dripping wet, suit ruined, eyes burning like wildfire, I couldn't breathe. "I didn't touch her," he said immediately, as if reading my thoughts. "I didn't want her. I only want you." I swallowed hard, every wall I'd built trembling. "You don't mean that. You're a lawyer, you say whatever sounds good." He stepped closer, voice breaking. "For once in my life, Daniel, this isn't about winning or strategy. It's about you. I want you not as an accident, not as a mistake, God, don't you see it? I've never wanted anything more than I want this marriage to be real." The room spun. I wanted to run. I wanted to stay. And then he whispered, "I love you." The words ripped through me like lightning. I crossed the space before I could stop myself, grabbed his ruined suit jacket, and kissed him. It was desperate, messy, the kind of kiss that left no room for denial. His hands found my waist, pulling me in like he was afraid I'd vanish again. And just like that, the fight was over. The months that followed weren't perfect. We fought, God, did we fight? About money, about schedules, about my stubborn need for independence against his stubborn need to protect. But beneath it all was something neither of us could deny. Love, raw and real and unshakable. Adrien learned to soften his edges. I learned to trust. And one morning, 6 months after that courthouse mistake, he woke me with coffee and a nervous smile. "Marry me," he said simply. I blinked. "We already are." "Not like this," he whispered, taking out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple but beautiful, glowing in the early sunlight. This time not as a mistake. This time by choice. My throat closed. My eyes burned. And for the first time in my life I said yes without hesitation. We stood together in a small garden behind the courthouse, surrounded by only a handful of friends. Ethan cried harder than I did. Adrien looked at me like I was the only person on earth. When the officiant pronounced us husbands, for real this time, I felt something I had never believed I could. Peace. Adrien leaned down, his lips brushing mine, his hand warm in mine. "See," he murmured, "sometimes mistakes are the best thing that can happen." And for once I couldn't argue, because in the middle of a city that had chewed me up and spit me out, I had found something I thought I'd never deserve. Love. A home. A partner who saw me, all of me, and still chose me every day. A mistake, maybe, but the best damn mistake of my life. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.